The first time Ellen saw the dog, it was sitting completely still by a grave that didn't have a name. It was early November, cold enough for frost to coat the cemetery gates, but not yet snow. Ellen had come to visit her late husband's resting place, as she did every Sunday morning. She brought flowers, talked to him, sometimes just sat in silence. But this morning, something was different. There was a dog sitting on the other side of the cemetery, not near any of the older family plots and not near any visible marker, just a mound of earth worn flat by time, with a crooked wooden cross poking out of the ground like it had been made in a hurry. And the dog, large, mutt-like, with thick black and brown fur and tired eyes, was just sitting there, motionless, not tied, not wearing a collar, just watching. Ellen hesitated before approaching. "Hey, boy," she said gently. "You lost?" The dog didn't flinch, didn't growl. It blinked once, slowly, and returned its gaze to the grave. Ellen took another step. "Are you waiting for someone?" Still no movement. She glanced at the wooden cross. No name, no date, just the faint shape of something carved into the surface, maybe a letter or part of one. "Who's buried here?" she asked softly. The dog finally turned its head to look at her, just for a moment, then back to the grave. That was the beginning. For the next 6 weeks, every time Ellen visited the cemetery, the dog was there, always in the same spot, sometimes standing, sometimes lying down, but always next to the nameless grave. She tried asking around. The groundskeeper didn't know anything about the dog, said he'd noticed it about 2 months ago, always quiet, never a problem, never left trash, never barked. "It's like he's guarding someone," he said. Ellen asked about the grave. No records, no official plot, just a small patch of land near the edge of the property that hadn't been on the new cemetery map. "That section hasn't been used in years," the caretaker shrugged. "Maybe someone made their own marker." Ellen started bringing food. The dog never approached her directly, but once she backed away, it would eat slowly, never like it was starving, just careful. One Sunday, it started to rain, cold, bitter, steady. Ellen almost turned around after stepping out of her car. But then she saw him, still there, sitting by the grave, water dripping from his thick coat. She couldn't take it anymore. She pulled out her umbrella, walked across the grass, and held it over him. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge her. She stayed like that for 10 minutes, hand trembling, umbrella raised, until finally, the dog stood, looked at her, and took a single step forward, then another, and sat beside her. From that moment on, she called him Hank. Ellen didn't try to take him home, not at first, but the bond was real now, slow, cautious, but unmistakable. Hank would walk her back to her car, wait until she left, and the next time she came, he'd already be there. Eventually, she brought an old towel from her trunk, then a blanket, then a water bowl. One morning, Hank limped. Something in his back leg wasn't right. Ellen knelt beside him. He didn't growl, didn't pull away. She gently touched the leg, swollen, hot to the touch. "I can't leave you out here like this," she whispered. That day, for the first time, Hank climbed into her back seat and went home with her. At first, he didn't sleep inside. He curled up on the porch, head on his paws, facing the woods. By week 2, he'd moved to the doorway. By week 3, to the rug beside the couch. He never barked, never begged, never whined, but every morning he stood by the door, waiting to return to the grave. Ellen let him lead. Rain, wind, even light snow. He never missed a visit. She started bringing her own tools, clippers to trim the weeds, a brush to clean the cross. She even replaced it with a sturdier wooden post and carved a heart into the top. No name, still no record, but the spot began to feel known, remembered, honored. Then, one morning in January, something changed. The cross was gone, snapped in half, shoved out of the ground like it had been kicked. Hank stood over it, tail stiff, teeth slightly bared. Ellen knelt beside him. What happened? No tracks, no signs of animals, just one thing. A set of tire marks, barely visible in the frost, leading to the nearby service road, a place that had been closed off for months. The next day, Ellen brought a hammer and nails and rebuilt the cross. Hank watched her the entire time, eyes focused, alert. That night, he didn't sleep at the door. He slept beside her bed. Ellen started to dig, not literally, at least not yet. She began checking county records, obituaries, asking the Historical Society about unmarked graves. No one had answers, but a few old-timers remembered something. There was a case, years ago, maybe 15, maybe more. A body found out by the train tracks. No ID. No one ever claimed it. They buried him quiet, fast. Some people said it wasn't just a stranger. It was someone who saved a kid. Ellen's heart stopped. What kid? But no one knew, or wouldn't say. That night, she dreamed of footsteps in the snow, and when she woke, Hank was standing by the door, growling softly. The next day, when they visited the grave, something was sticking out of the ground beside it, not buried deep, just beneath the frost. She pulled it free. It was a rusted, twisted dog tag, not a military one, a pet tag, round. On the front, a name, Buddy. On the back, a single word, Hero. Ellen sat in her kitchen with the dog tag in her hand long after the sun had gone down. She turned it over again and again as if the word hero might change into something else. It didn't, but something inside her had. A shift, a knowing. Buddy. That was his name, not Hank, not Stray. He had belonged to someone, and that someone mattered. She looked across the room. Buddy, she still whispered the name in her mind, lay curled in his usual spot by the window. He wasn't asleep, just watching, as if he'd been waiting for her to realize something. That grave wasn't random, and neither was he. The next morning, Ellen took the tag to the local shelter, then the vet's office. No one recognized it. The shape and font were old, probably early 2000s or late 90s, before digital registration became common. But a woman at the front desk remembered something odd. "We had a dog brought in maybe 16 years ago," she said, squinting. "Black and brown, big boy, wounded, brought in by a sheriff's deputy, said it was involved in some kind of train incident." Ellen froze. "Train?" The woman nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think a man died saving a kid or something. The dog wouldn't leave his side. They patched him up and someone adopted him not long after. Didn't think he'd survive. But he did." "What happened to the man?" The woman lowered her voice. "Buried somewhere quiet, I think. They never identified him." Ellen's hands began to tremble. "Do you remember the name of the officer?" she asked. The woman tapped her fingers on the desk. "Maybe Whitaker, something like that. He retired a few years ago." Ellen found him in the phone book that evening. Yes, the phone book. He was old school like that. She called, introduced herself, explained, and when she mentioned the words dog, grave, and no marker, his voice went completely still. "Where did you say you found him?" he asked. She told him. There was silence. Then, "I'll be there in the morning." Deputy Whitaker was tall, wiry, and walked like someone who carried ghosts in his knees. He stepped out of his old truck and immediately removed his hat when he saw Buddy. "Well, I'll be damned," he said quietly. "It's really him." Buddy sniffed him once, circled, then sat by Ellen's feet. "He remembers," Whitaker said. "I do too." They walked to the grave together. Whitaker didn't speak for a long time. He just looked down. "This is where we buried him," he said finally. "No family, no name, just a man who jumped onto the tracks when a little boy fell." He swallowed hard. "We never figured out where he came from. No ID, no wallet. Just that dog refused to leave his side." "Who was the boy?" Ellen asked softly. Whitaker looked up. "He survived. I pulled him back just in time. I think the dog helped." "You think?" "I remember teeth in my arm, pulling, and then the man shoved the kid off the rails before the train hit." He paused. "I never forgot that sound, or that dog." He crouched beside Buddy. "You're still watching, huh?" Buddy looked at him, then at the grave, then sat again. That night, Ellen dug out an old newspaper archive from the local library. It took hours, but she found it. 2007, local boy pulled from tracks. Seconds before train collision, there was no mention of the man who died, just an unidentified passerby who intervened at the last second. The article focused on the boy. Name, Ethan Rowe. Age, 6. Injured, but alive. Parents refused interviews, moved away shortly after. No photos of the dog, no follow-up story, no name. But Ellen had enough. She found Ethan online 2 days later, now 22, living in the next state over, studying forestry. She sent a message, not a long one, just a question. "Do you remember the man who saved your life?" He replied 3 hours later. "Not his face, just his voice, and the dog. I still dream about that dog." Another message followed. "Why are you asking?" She told him everything. 3 days later, Ethan drove 5 hours to see the grave. He brought flowers and something else, a framed photo of himself, age 6, standing next to a German shepherd with bandages on one leg. "My mom took this a few days after it happened," he said. "We visited the shelter. I wanted to adopt him, but we couldn't. We moved, but I never forgot him." He looked down at Buddy. "You stayed," he whispered. The dog looked up at him, just once, then lay down next to the grave. They held a small memorial that weekend, just the three of them, Ellen, Ethan, and Deputy Whitaker. They replaced the wooden cross with a proper stone marker. "Here lies an unknown hero. He saved a life and was never forgotten." They added a second plaque beside it, "Buddy, the dog who waited, the friend who remembered." Buddy passed that winter, peacefully, at Ellen's side. He was old, slower, but he waited until the snow came. They buried him beside the grave, together again. Ethan comes back every year now. He brings his son. They sit on the bench Ellen built near the two graves, and when the boy asks, "Why did the dog wait so long?" Ethan always answers the same way, "Because real love doesn't forget, not even after we're gone." After Buddy's passing, the cemetery seemed quieter, not just because he was gone, but because something about the place had shifted. Settled, maybe, like a promise had finally been fulfilled. But the silence wasn't peace, not yet. Ellen continued visiting weekly. She kept the marker clean, added flowers, and sometimes sat for an hour or more listening to the wind. Ethan came a few times, usually with his young son Caleb, who always carried a notebook and crayons. One day, the boy drew a picture of a tall man standing beside a dog under a tree. He didn't know what the man looked like, so he gave him no face, just a silhouette with kind hands. Why did he wait there so long? Caleb asked. Ellen didn't have an answer, but the question wouldn't leave her. 2 weeks later, Ellen was back at the town archives. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The timeline didn't add up. If Buddy had lived for years after the incident, how did he end up back at the grave? Who brought him? Why now? And who was the man? She searched for everything she could: missing persons reports, train accident records, cold cases from the surrounding counties. Most were dead ends. But then she found something odd: a police report filed in 2006, a year before the train accident. A man had been spotted walking along the highway with a dog, confused and disoriented. He didn't carry ID. He didn't speak, or rather, he didn't speak English. The officer who filed the report noted that he believed the man might have been Eastern European, possibly Russian or Ukrainian. No match was ever found in any database. No follow-up, no name. Just one note, scribbled in pen at the bottom. Dog was extremely protective, refused to leave his side. Officer had to back off. The location was less than 30 miles from where the train accident occurred. Ellen's pulse spiked. It had to be him. She visited Whitaker again. The retired deputy looked older than she remembered, more sunken into his chair, slower to smile. But when she told him what she'd found, he sat up straighter. "I remember that," he said. "We got the report, too. Guy walking barefoot with a mutt along Route 9. People thought he was homeless. He wasn't hurting anyone. By the time we sent someone out there, he was gone." Could that have been the same man from the tracks? Whitaker didn't answer immediately. Then, if it was, he'd been wandering for a while. Ellen tapped the photo of the police report. Why would someone like that show up, save a child, and disappear again? No name, no family. Whitaker looked down. "Some people don't disappear," he said quietly. "They're erased." That night, Ellen sat on her porch with the folder of printouts in her lap. Buddy's collar lay on the table beside her, polished now, the hero tag cleaned and gleaming faintly in the porch light. She stared into the trees, and then she remembered something. Back when Buddy had first come home with her during one of his early nights by the fireplace, he had woken from a dream, twitching, panting, pacing. She'd sat with him, calming him down. He'd eventually laid his head on her foot, but not before growling once, a low guttural sound, not fear, not anger, recognition, like he'd heard something he remembered, a voice, a name. Ellen stood abruptly and went inside. She dug out the shoebox where she kept small items Buddy had arrived with, the towel, the first bowl, the scrap of the broken cross she'd saved. And beneath it all, something she hadn't noticed before. Tucked inside the blanket's edge, nearly sewn in, a tiny metal tag, not a pet ID, a military-style tag, worn nearly smooth. But 2 letters were still legible, a K. The next morning, Ellen made calls. She reached out to a contact in Veterans Affairs. No one recognized the initials, no match for recent enlistees. But a name did come up when she checked old asylum records. Not the mental health kind, but immigration cases. Alexei Kovalenko, refugee, arrived in the U.S. in 2005. No known relatives. Last documented address, none. Status, missing, presumed, relocated. She sat back in her chair, hands trembling. Buddy's man had a name. He wasn't just a stranger on the tracks. He had lived, walked, tried to find a home, and no one had ever told his story, until now. Ethan came the next weekend with Caleb. Ellen told them what she'd found. Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I didn't know if I should show you this," he said, "but I found it a few years ago. It was tucked into my old memory box. My mom must have saved it." He unfolded the page. It was a child's drawing, a man standing near a railroad track. Next to him, a dog, and beside that, in 6-year-old handwriting, "To the man with the brave dog, thank you for saving me." Ethan handed it to Ellen. "I don't remember drawing it, but I guess I never really forgot." They returned to the grave together. Ellen placed a new plaque beside the marker. Alexei Kovalenko, 1975 to 2007. He saved a child, and his dog never stopped waiting. For the first time, the grave felt complete. But the story wasn't over, because a week later, Ellen received a letter, no return address. Inside, a short note in Cyrillic, translated into shaky English. "If you know his name, please contact me. He was my brother. We thought he was gone. Please, I have to know." And suddenly, what began as a silent vigil was about to become something much bigger. Ellen read the letter 5 times before saying a word. The handwriting was careful, the English broken but clear. There was no signature, no return address, just a name printed at the bottom, Irina Kovalenko. She was Alexei's sister, and somehow, after nearly 2 decades of silence, she had found her way to him, through a headstone, a dog, and the quiet act of remembrance. Ellen didn't hesitate. She wrote back, included everything, the photo of the grave, the marker, the dog tag. She scanned the newspaper article about Ethan's rescue, the photo Caleb had drawn, and even a snapshot of the folded red towel where Alexei's tag had been hidden for years. She mailed the package and waited. Weeks passed. Snow fell. The cemetery went still beneath white sheets of frost. And then, one morning in early February, Ellen received a call. The voice on the other end was soft, accented, breathless. "Miss Ellen, this is Irina. I got your letter." Ellen held the phone tighter. "I'm so glad you reached out." There was a pause. Then, "You found him." Ellen didn't know what to say. Irina continued, her voice trembling. "We lost him in 2007. He left Kiev during the unrest. Said he needed to go. Said he had to find someone. He never told us who. Just that it was something he owed. Then we never heard from him again." Ellen sat down slowly. "Owed?" "Yes," Irina said. "He didn't talk about it, but I know it haunted him. He carried guilt. From the war," Ellen blinked. "He was a soldier?" "Before," Irina said. "Before he left. Then he tried to make peace, help people. But something followed him here." Ellen's heart pounded. She glanced at the stone marker through her frost-covered window. "Alexei died saving a child," she said softly. There was silence on the other end, and then a sob. "Then he found his peace," Irina whispered. Irina arrived 2 weeks later. She was in her mid-40s, slender, with soft gray eyes and a wool scarf that smelled faintly of pine. She carried a leather bag, a bundle of old photographs, and a folded letter Alexei had once written but never sent. Ellen met her at the grave. The wind was biting, but the sky had opened, pale blue with streaks of gold. It was quiet, only the soft crunch of boots in snow. Irina knelt beside the marker and placed a photograph at its base. It was of 2 children, Alexei and herself, standing on a hillside, smiling, the same smile she wore now, though faint and trembling. "He was always the brave one," she said. She told Ellen stories about growing up during difficult times, how Alexei always wanted to be a rescuer, how he once carried a stray dog through a blizzard to save it. She told her about the war, the things he saw, and the guilt that never left him after a boy in his care had died in an airstrike. He couldn't save him, she said, and he never forgave himself. Ellen was silent for a long time, and then she whispered, "But he saved this one." Irina touched the grave, and Buddy stayed to make sure we'd know. That night, Ellen couldn't sleep. She walked the cemetery path by moonlight, boots crunching through thin ice. She sat on the bench near the grave, wrapped in a heavy coat, and there, under the tree, she saw movement, a shadow. She squinted, and a fox appeared, sleek, silver-gray, standing perfectly still just beyond the grave. Then a second shadow, larger, dog-shaped, gone in a blink. She shivered, but she wasn't afraid. She just said, quietly into the cold, "We know now, and we won't forget." The next morning, Ellen and Irina installed a new plaque beside the marker, not to replace it, but to complete it. It read, "He carried his guilt across an ocean, but the forest forgave him, and so did the boy he saved." They added a final line beneath Buddy's name, "Because love waits, even after the world moves on." Irina stayed in town for several days. She helped Ellen go through old records, sent a full report to the Ukrainian consulate, and submitted a formal request to have Alexei's name added to an international memorial for civilian heroes. But before she left, she gave Ellen one last gift, a letter, yellowed, creased, written in Alexei's hand. It was dated only a week before the accident. Ellen unfolded it with shaking fingers. It wasn't addressed to anyone specific, but it began, "If you find this, it means I did what I came here to do," and ended, "I can't undo the past, but maybe I can change someone else's future. If I fall, I hope he lives. I hope the dog stays with him. I hope someone remembers me, not as a ghost, but as a man who tried." Alexei Ellen folded the letter and placed it in a weatherproof frame inside the visitor box at the cemetery. A week later, someone left a small wooden carving of a dog at the base of the stone. No note, no signature, just 3 carved letters in the base. E.R. Ethan Rowe, the boy he saved. Spring arrived slowly that year. The last frost lingered into late April, and when the snow finally melted, it left behind soft, damp earth and the kind of silence that felt expectant, like the world was pausing for something to begin. Ellen continued visiting the grave every Sunday. She wasn't the only one anymore. Since Irina's visit, the cemetery had become a quiet destination. Strangers from nearby towns came to leave flowers. A class from the local high school did a research project on Alexei, and one of the students made a short documentary. Veterans came and stood in silence. One man left his Bronze Service Medal and walked away without a word. The grave had become something more than a story. It had become a reminder of sacrifice, of memory, of what it means to be loyal, even after death. One Saturday morning, Ellen brought Caleb with her while Ethan worked. The boy had grown, taller, quieter, always sketching. Today he had a new notebook and a blue hoodie he refused to take off even as the sun climbed. They walked the now familiar path through the cemetery, past the line of pines, around the bend, and toward the stone that now bore Alexei's name. But Caleb paused. He wasn't looking at the grave. He was looking at the edge of the woods behind it. "What is it?" Ellen asked. He pointed. "I saw something." She looked. Nothing moved, just trees, swaying gently. "Probably a squirrel," she said, smiling. Caleb frowned. Number It was bigger. He took a few steps toward the trees. "Wait," Ellen started, but Caleb was already kneeling. There, between the roots of an old birch, half covered in leaves, was something square. He pulled it out carefully, a small, rusted tin box, locked, but barely. They brought it back to Ellen's car. Inside were several folded items, a photo, faded, color-drained, of a young boy sitting beside a German shepherd under a tree. Caleb stared at it for a long time. "That's not Buddy," he said. Ellen leaned closer. "No, it's older." There was also a page torn from a book, and on it, written in thick black marker, one word, "Wait." At the bottom, in tiny letters, a signature, Alexei K. That night, Ellen spread everything on her kitchen table. Caleb drew quietly beside her while she pieced it together. The boy in the photo wasn't Ethan. The dog wasn't Buddy. But the tree looked familiar. It was the same birch at the edge of the woods. "Why would he bury this here?" Caleb asked. Ellen thought for a moment. Maybe it's not who he saved. Maybe it's who he lost. Caleb looked up. Someone before Ethan? Ellen nodded. A boy he couldn't save. Maybe this is how he remembered him. They sat in silence. Then Caleb whispered, "He waited here too." "Who did?" "The boy in the photo. I think he waited, the same way Buddy did." Ellen shivered, not from fear, but from the deep, quiet weight of understanding. Ethan came the next morning. When they showed him the box, he didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "There's a kind of grief that never leaves. I think Alexei came here trying to carry it somewhere else. Maybe he couldn't let go of the first boy. So he stayed until he could save another." He touched the photo gently. "And Buddy never left because he knew Alexei hadn't finished what he came here to do." Caleb added the photo to the small wooden memorial box near the grave. People had started leaving tokens, small carvings, flags, stones with words etched into them. He slipped the old image inside with a note of his own. He waited, so someone could find him. C.R. Ellen glanced over his shoulder. "C.R.? Caleb Rowe," he said. "I think I want to remember him too." That spring, the town council officially renamed the cemetery trail the Hero's Path. A new sign stood at the entrance, in memory of Alexei Kovalenko and Buddy, who waited, watched, and remembered. Their story was silent until someone listened. At the dedication, a woman approached Ellen. She was in her 60s, soft-spoken. She introduced herself as Martha Benson and said her family had once lived along Route 9, not far from the woods where Alexei was first seen. "My son disappeared in 2005, she said quietly. "We searched for weeks. He was never found." She reached into her coat and pulled out a photo. A little boy, about 7, sitting with a dog. The same boy from the photo Caleb had found. Ellen's knees went weak. Martha continued, "I never knew what happened to him, but I always felt someone tried to help him, that I'd never be able to thank whoever it was." Ellen reached out, took her hand, and held it. "You just did." It started with a drawing. One evening, Caleb sat on the bench near the grave, sketchbook in his lap, pencil moving almost without thought. He wasn't drawing the cemetery. He wasn't drawing Buddy. He was drawing the tree line, but not as it looked now, as it used to look. There were no leaves on the trees, no clear paths, just shadow and light, and a silhouette kneeling beside something in the snow. He didn't remember starting it. When he was done, he didn't sign it. He just tore it out and placed it beside the grave. He thought no more of it. The next morning, he came back. The drawing was gone. In its place, laid carefully across the stone, was a small feather, gray and white, like the kind that came from a hawk or a hunting bird. He blinked, looked around. Nothing moved. The wind was still, but someone or something had responded. Over the next week, Caleb left more drawings, not dramatic ones, not even full scenes, just pieces, a paw print, a pair of eyes, a hand holding a leash. He left them under small stones at the base of the memorial, never more than one a day. Each time something new appeared in return. A pine cone, a pebble shaped like a heart. Once a thin strip of cloth, red, frayed, exactly like the scarf Ellen had found in the dog's bedding the winter Buddy died. No one else saw these things, but Caleb knew he wasn't imagining it. One evening, he brought Ellen to the site. They stood near the grave as the sun dipped low, and Caleb pointed to a fresh gift, a carved wooden token in the shape of a dog's paw. He hadn't left it. No one he knew had been there since the morning. Ellen picked it up gently. "Someone's still watching," she whispered. "Or remembering," Caleb said. They stayed until the last light disappeared. Neither spoke of ghosts. This wasn't haunting. It was something gentler. The story of Alexei and Buddy had continued to spread. A journalist visited from out of state. A podcast episode aired titled "The Dog Who Waited." A group of veterans raised funds to place a permanent granite memorial next to the wooden marker, engraved in Ukrainian and English. But for Caleb, it wasn't about the attention. It was about the feeling. The way the forest seemed to hold its breath in some places. The way certain paths always felt warmer. The way animals, foxes, crows, deer, would pause just a second longer near the grave, as if tipping their heads in acknowledgement. Something about the land remembered. And Caleb? He was beginning to feel like part of it. On the first warm day of May, he returned with a drawing in his hand. This one took days to finish. It showed Alexei sitting on the ground, back to the viewer, Buddy curled beside him. No face, no grave, just the two of them in the woods, together, quiet. He placed it at the foot of the birch tree behind the grave. He didn't expect anything, but the next morning, something was waiting there. A child's drawing, crude, messy, but unmistakable. A stick figure holding the leash of a dog with big ears and a huge smile. Underneath it, in shaky block letters, "Thank you for finding him." Caleb picked it up and pressed it to his chest. And for the first time, he cried. Ellen found him sitting on the bench that evening. He didn't speak. He just handed her the paper. She stared at it for a long time. Then she said, "It's not about what we see." He looked up. "It's about what we give back." Caleb nodded. "I think he knows now," he said softly. "He's not forgotten." That weekend, they installed a new wooden box near the trailhead. Not for memorials, not for flowers, for drawings, for stories, for anything someone wanted to leave behind for someone they'd lost, human or animal. They called it the Buddy Box, and within a week it was full. Letters to fathers, sketches of pets, crayon notes from kids to grandparents. One girl left a picture of a butterfly with the words, "I know you didn't mean to leave." One veteran wrote, "You saved me. You'll never know that, but you did." And one note, unsigned, simply said, "Tell the dog I'm okay now." By midsummer, the trail had become a kind of living memory. Quiet, respectful, not flashy, but honest. And one morning, Ellen arrived to find something she didn't expect. A small bouquet of white flowers at the base of Buddy's grave, and tucked into it, a single photo, black and white, of Alexei, smiling, younger than they'd ever seen him, No dog in the frame, just him. And on the back, in neat handwriting, "He saved people before that boy. He saved me, too. I never got to say it. I'm saying it now. No name, no address. But that was enough. The last letter came in late July. It was handwritten, addressed simply to caretakers of the hero's path. Inside was a short note in neat script and a folded map. The note read, "My grandfather spoke of a man named Alexei. Said he met him once in the woods after the war. He never told anyone until near the end of his life. Thought it was a dream. But he described the same dog, the same silence, the same sadness in the man's eyes. This is where he saw him. I think there's something there." The map showed the edge of a forest preserve 40 miles away. It overlapped with the old rail line, a forgotten path, now overgrown. No official trails, no signs. Caleb felt something shift in his chest when he read it. He packed a backpack, a flashlight, his sketchbook, and a copy of the photo Ellen had received, the one where Alexei smiled, unaware of all he would become to people he'd never meet. Ellen didn't stop him. She just said, "If the woods call, you listen." The old forest was thick, wild, slow to give up its secrets. Caleb hiked for hours, following the map, the faded pencil markings, the curve of land that used to hold tracks. Nature had swallowed most of it. Rails twisted with moss, posts collapsed into ferns. But then, near a bend in the ridge, he found it. A small circle of stones, not large, not obvious, but arranged with purpose. In the center, a tree stump, hollowed, with something inside. He knelt, reached in carefully, and pulled out a rusted tin box, sealed with wax string. Inside, a folded page, yellowed with age, a worn photo of a boy holding a paper flag, and a wooden token, etched with a paw print. The note was signed, "For the one who finds me, you are not alone." Caleb sat back and stared into the trees, and for the first time he didn't feel like a visitor. He felt like he'd been expected. He returned the next day with Ellen. Together they cleared the circle, marked the area, and placed a new sign, "The Quiet Watch," and underneath, "In memory of the paths walked in silence and the guardians who walked them alone." They left the box untouched, just resealed, preserved. Some things didn't need to be moved, just protected. That autumn, the town built a small storytelling shelter at the entrance of the hero's path. A wooden bench, a corkboard for notes, a roof made of cedar. Inside they placed a single plaque. "This trail remembers what people forget, that loyalty outlives language, that grief is love with nowhere to go, and that sometimes a dog knows what a human heart can't yet say." Ellen retired from her job that year. She still walked the trail, still sat by the grave, still brought flowers, but the sanctuary now had a different guardian, Caleb. Now 17, more grounded than most adults, ran the outreach program for local kids. Every weekend, he led small groups down the trail, telling the story of Alexei and Buddy, not like a fable, but like a history, a quiet man, a loyal dog, a forgotten grave, a boy who was saved, and a world that finally listened. On the last day of the year, Caleb made one final sketch. He drew Alexei again, this time walking into the woods, side by side with Buddy. No grave, no storm, just calm. Behind them, drawn in soft pencil, a faint line of children, animals, even strangers, following the same path, all quietly connected. He placed the sketch inside the Buddy box, folded carefully. On the back, he wrote, "We are here because you waited." And when he stepped back, a gust of wind lifted the leaves behind him. just enough to reveal a set of paw prints in the dirt, only for a moment, then gone.